Conflict ravages through Israel and Gaza after Hamas's brutal attack. We should be mourning for the thousands of innocent people who are getting wounded, killed, and much worse. But people around the world are actively celebrating the conflict and making it about themselves. Social media was a mistake. Welcome to America Uncovered. I'm Chris Chappell. You probably know by now that Israel has formally declared war against Hamas after Hamas militants attacked from Gaza. And if you don't know, congratulations! Is there room for two under that rock where you're living? I could use a vacation. Hamas, a terrorist organization, invaded Israel from Gaza by land, by air, by sea, and by rocket. Israel retaliated with massive missile strikes and crackdowns, leading to even more devastation. There's far more footage of the conflict. I'll spare you from seeing the gory and sick videos, but it needs to be said just how vicious Hamas is. I'd say we could use an America Uncovered mental health break right about now, but if we stop for one every time it's needed in this story, this video would be 9 hours long. I'll give you one at the end. In the meantime, here's a corgi playing fetch at the beach to tide you over. Anyways, Hamas proudly went from door to door, kidnapping and slaughtering men, women, and children. They've raped women, beheaded babies, burned people alive, and defiled corpses. Just look at that corgi go. What's happening is absolutely horrific, and it's something that every person, regardless of their background, should be appalled at. That's why many around the world have rallied to show solidarity for Israel. But not everybody sympathizes with Israel, which is a bigger understatement than saying that cows aren't big fans of Arby's, because they hate curly fries. There have been a ton of pro-Palestinian rallies as well, where protesters see Israel as an oppressor. Rather than grieve for all of the lives lost, both in Israel and Gaza, these people have focused solely on demanding a free and independent Palestinian state and an end to U.S. aid to Israel, including progressive U.S. Democrats like Rashida Tlaib and Cori Bush. I hope they aren't planning on becoming drummers because they have absolutely no sense of timing. But some have gone way beyond just calling for an independent Palestinian state. Some have called for Israel's removal from the Middle East.
From the river to the sea! From the river to the sea! Palestine will be free! Palestine will be free! There is only one solution! There is only one solution! Intifada revolution! Intifada revolution!
Wow, I guess at least they only called for one solution instead of a final solution. These particular pro-Palestinian protests showed absolutely no sympathy for the victims of Hamas, just like this Iranian TV host.
زخم شد که شد به جهنم که زخم شد به جهنم که کشته شدن رفتن کشور فلسطین رو اشغال کردن حالا مثلا ناراحتن این که چرا باشون بدرفتاری شده.
In fact, some have even called for the death of all Jews. Well, never mind about how the rhetoric could have been worse. Now, the only way these Australian protesters could make this thing worse is if they chanted this while playing a didgeridoo. Not only that, but there are people who are openly supporting Hamas. The same people who, mind you, have kidnapped, killed, and raped civilians. Rather than call them terrorists or rapists, these pro-Palestinian protesters see Hamas as resistance fighters.
Early morning on Saturday, October 7th, our resistance stormed illegal settlements and paraglided across colonial borders.
Hamas is framed as a terrorist organization.
Yeah, it's just how you frame things. See, some see kidnapping, killing, and raping civilians as just plain evil. Others see it as empowering. Do they watch The Fault in Our Stars and root for the cancer? That tumor isn't a disease, it's a freedom fighter. That really isn't that far off from how some people see it. From their point of view, the Hamas attack is resistance that's worthy of being praised as heroic. In fact, some say blaming Hamas for firing rockets is like blaming a woman for punching her rapist. Yeah, sure, if she also punched hundreds of people in the vicinity of the rapist and, beheaded babies, Great analogy. Even media outlets like the Qatar-based Al Jazeera are feeding into this narrative. When reporting about deaths in both Palestinian territories and Israel, it framed things in a very peculiar way. When talking about Palestinian casualties, Al Jazeera reported how people were killed. But when talking about Israeli casualties, Al Jazeera framed them as just a death toll due to Hamas attacks. Word choice carries a lot of emotion. When you say killed, people think of murder. When you say death, people think of things like cancer, which is a freedom fighter. Now, to be fair, Western media has done the same thing, just the other way around. The BBC, for example, said people died in Gaza, while also saying people were killed in Israel. This has led to memes about a death language race tier list. That, in turn, makes it very easy for Marxists to join the Israel-Hamas conflict with their oppressor versus oppressed framework. I'll tell you how after the break. Welcome back. Pro-Palestinians have drawn a lot of supporters of other causes. This includes Marxists. They're happy to hop on the bandwagon because they don't see it as your bandwagon. They see it as our bandwagon. Some people view Israel as an oppressor against the Palestinians, and that fits the Marxist framework perfectly, which is why this socialist worker magazine calls to smash the Israeli terror state. Marxists see the world only as the oppressed and the oppressors, with no nuance whatsoever. Any action taken by the oppressed, no matter how horrific, is justified as necessary for liberation. Like when Eldridge Cleaver, one of the leaders of the Black Panthers, said he raped white women because he viewed it as an insurrectionary act. It delighted me that I was defying and trampling upon the white man's law, defiling his women. God, I need a mental health break. But the problem is, you know who else is exploiting the Palestinian people? The Palestinian leaders. Like this report exposing corruption within President Abbas's inner circle. Or when Hamas violently suppresses protesters, or uses them as human shields. For people operating under this Marxist ideology, the oppressed class is defined by its oppression. That's why they say the Hamas attack was simply evidence that Palestinians were breaking down colonialism and liberating themselves. Oh, so I guess them liberating innocent civilians' heads from their bodies wasn't terrorism, it was artistic expression. By that logic, anything and everything is justified to dehumanize and destroy the oppressor, which would explain why Marxists are also praising Hamas. Here you can see BLM Chicago's poster saying, "I stand with Palestine," with the silhouette of a Hamas paratrooper, like the ones seen on gyrocopters who shot up partygoers. Rooting for murderers. Not the best look for an organization where 2/3 of their name is Lives Matter. The New York City branch of the Democratic Socialists of America pinned the blame for all violence on Israel, saying the root cause of violence in the region are the far-right Netanyahu government's escalating human rights violations and explicitly genocidal rhetoric and the dehumanization of the Palestinian people. This is a very dangerous mindset. It allows for those who identify as the oppressed class to endorse any and all action against anyone they categorize as the oppressor, even rape. It's a complete justification of dehumanization. And yet, according to Marxists, the oppressed could never do any wrong, which is why they blame Hamas's actions solely on Israel. It's kind of like when people say there are no bad dogs, only bad dog owners. Oh yeah? Then how do you explain Chihuahuas? These little yappy menaces are pure carnage, and no amount of training will drive the evil from their souls. But there's something else going on here. If you look carefully, you'll notice something in the current discourse over the Israel-Hamas conflict. It's that people who are not in the region project themselves onto the conflict. This is especially obvious from pro-Palestinian and pro-Hamas supporters. One of the organizers of the Palestinian protests in Sydney, Australia, the same one that said "gas the Jews," thankfully without a didgeridoo, is an example of this.
We are feeling a mix of emotions. We are feeling angry. We are feeling saddened with the pain and the suffering that we Palestinians have been facing until this day. A injustice at the hands of the Israeli occupation.
Not to diminishing the suffering the Palestinians go through, but people like these protesters are so focused on just themselves and people like them as victim that they show very little empathy for those who aren't like them, like the Israeli victims. Everything that's wrong is pinned solely on other people. What makes their self-righteousness so clear is that not every pro-Palestinian is like this. There are pro-Palestinians who realize they need to stand up to Hamas. Even AOC, who is pro-Palestinian, condemned anti-Semitism after the Democratic Socialists of America organized the pro-Palestinian rally that cheered for Hamas. This highlights those who are so self-absorbed in their identity, Palestinian or otherwise, that they don't care about other people and shift blame onto everyone but themselves. Pro tip if you want sympathy: having no sympathy for those who aren't like you isn't really going to attract many people, especially when you endorse an organization like Hamas. But it's not just the pro-Palestinian voices that make everything about them. I'll tell you more after the break. Welcome back. So after the horrible tragedy that happened in Israel, I'm sure your first thought was, hey, how can I use this to score political points? Because the real villains here aren't the murderers and rapists, but Democrats. Trump questioned how Jews, or anybody who loves Israel, can vote Democrat. Okay, let's play a little game. Guess who tweeted this? All Americans should be horrified and outraged by the brazen terrorist attacks on Israel and the slaughter of innocent civilians. We stand squarely alongside our ally Israel as it dismantles Hamas. Well, that sounds like something everybody could get behind. But oops, this was tweeted by former Democratic President Barack Obama. You know what that means. Better criticize Obama because it wasn't tweeted out early enough. Yeah, he could have been using the tragedy to attack his opponents for days. Money is another thing Democrats are being criticized for. The U.S. sent $221 million to Palestinians in Obama's last hours. Trump cut a lot of that funding, which was then overturned by Biden, despite concerns raised by his own administration. That's why Trump claimed that the atrocities we are witnessing in Israel would have never happened if he was still president. This has big Mark Wahlberg saying he would have stopped 9/11 hijackers if he were on board the plane energy. Trump and other Republicans have also blamed Biden's Iran policy for the Hamas attacks. Iran has historically funded Hamas, and the U.S. government is now looking for evidence Iran was behind the attack. They point to the Biden administration's freeing of $6 billion to Iran just before the attack. However, the funds were not dispersed to Iran. Qatar's central bank is overseeing the funds, which are still in Doha. So unless someone's lying, that money couldn't have been used to fund these attacks. Another point of contention is Biden's southern border policy. Trump posted on Truth Social saying, the same people that raided Israel are pouring into America through the border. This feeds into a very common conservative talking point about how terrorists could infiltrate the U.S. through Mexico. This has been a concern for quite some time, especially with regards to Hezbollah in Latin America. We haven't found evidence that Hamas specifically is infiltrating the U.S., but that could also be because of the data. Homeland Security has always been pretty vague on the topic, but said it caught 160 people on its terrorism watch list trying to cross the southern border this year, but it didn't give their nationalities. So it's not a stretch to imagine that Hamas was on that list. Republicans pinned a lot of other things to Biden. Some pointed to Biden's withdrawal from Afghanistan as a problem, saying it may have helped Hamas with getting weapons. Just about everything goes back to blaming Biden and the Democrats. Now, perhaps everything that the Republicans are saying is true. Regardless, this just goes to show that people will always look at a tragedy and think, how can that benefit me? Or how can I use this to put down other people? Instead of, thinking about the actual victims on both sides. Because the big dumpster fire is the internet flame wars over who do you support, Israel or Palestine? Support isn't an idea or a feeling. You aren't doing anything. Sitting on your ass typing angry comments online is not support for anyone. It's enough to make anyone need an overdue and well-deserved America Uncovered mental health break. Honestly, looking through the public discourse on the Israel-Hamas conflict is just as toxic as YouTube's love of demonetization. Please support America Uncovered on patreon.com/America Uncovered. Click that orange button. And if you want to take a break from the horrors of the world, relax with this new video I made about the viral trend of people thinking about the Roman Empire. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. Thanks for watching America Uncovered.